You've been there before. You are at a holiday dinner with extended family, and maybe it's an older uncle or grandfather is explaining to everyone that the impeachment trial, well, it's just a sham trial. The news is really not to be trusted. The real conspiracy, he explains, is the liberal conspiracy and the way all the major journalists and news networks are part of that plan to disrupt this presidency. Who were you at the table? Were you the wife trying to keep everyone happy? Hush your husband and not talk politics at the family dinner table, please? Were you the daughter rolling her eyes in the silence you've adapted to, since there's really no point in arguing? Are you the son who desperately wants to stay in your dad's good graces? Or perhaps you are the one explaining to everyone else the way things are. Perhaps the topic is entirely different, or the audience is completely different, and you are the one hearing yourself talk, just telling it like it really is. How do we know what we don't know? I have a prayer I offer in my life from time to time, especially these days. Dear God, universe, please keep me surrounded by thought partners and friends who will protect me from my own obsolescence, from my own ignorance. Surround me with people who will call me out when I am wrong. May I be open. May I stay flexible in my perspective. In these times, this is a worthy prayer for our own resilience. And so God brought me a Unitarian Universalist congregation. In 1999, Cornell University psychologist David Dunning and Justin Kruger published a paper based on their studies of cognitive bias, a tendency for people across ages, across cultures, across socioeconomic classes to wrongly overestimate their own knowledge or their ability in a particular area. The researchers attributed this trend to a problem of metacognition, which is the ability to analyze one's own thoughts or performance. Those with limited knowledge in a domain suffer a dual burden. Not only do they reach mistaken conclusions and make regrettable errors, but their incompetence robs them of the ability to realize they are doing it. And the effect is not seen only among incompetent individuals. Most people, and I would say all people, have weak points where the bias can take hold. It applies to people with a seemingly solid knowledge base. This tendency may occur because gaining a small amount of knowledge in an area about something that you were previously ignorant can make someone feel as though they are suddenly experts. Only after continuing to explore a topic do people often realize how extensive it is and how much they still have to master. The problem is, ignorance feels a lot like knowledge. It does feel like we have left the golden age of information and we have entered the trash heap age of information, or the dumpster age of information. In this time of 140 characters and news feeds and ticker tape scrolling at the bottom of a screen, the truth is 80% of news readers never make it past the headline. That means only 2 out of 10 people are going to read the article beyond the headline. Our inflated sense of confidence is literally killing newspapers and threatens the entire future of journalism as we know it. Because we read that headline, so we know everything there is to know on the topic, right? And the problem, ultimately, with that Jimmy Kimmel clip is that while it's funny to laugh at people's overconfidence and their ultimate ignorance the way they cover that up, the Dunning-Kruger effect implicates us all. Every single one of us can relate to passionately making a claim, all the while resisting deeper awareness, or being told later we were not on the right track at all. And even then, the first response to wash over us is typically disbelief. No, that can't be right. Not to get too meta, but even now, as I share this with you, there is a lot I still don't know about the Dunning-Kruger effect. I mean, I only read 3 articles about the Dunning-Kruger effect this week, but at least I know there is more that I don't know. That's the best I can hope for. You know, I always thought one of the greatest gifts of the Obama presidency was his language around gay marriage. Do you remember that? He said to the American people, "I have evolved on this issue." That a brilliant, Harvard-educated world leader could admit to changing his position because of deeper awareness, new understanding, and new knowledge, that is still an inspiration to me as a leader. And we are a far way off from that moment in the leadership we see now. To have the ego strength and the spiritual fortitude to admit, the President of the United States, to admit that he was wrong and that he is capable of learning. I mean, this humility and this strength and leadership we saw in Obama offers us a way to overcome the Dunning-Kruger effect in our own lives. I will tell you, in my own life experience, while I was raised with a strong, clear sense of anti-racism and human rights, I will tell you I did not always understand queer theory, the gender spectrum. I did not always understand the ways society has constructed gender that does not always reflect people's natural experiences of their own bodies and their gender expression. And I remember many years ago at a Unitarian Universalist conference rolling my eyes when I was asked to write my pronouns on my name tag. Isn't it obvious, I thought? I thought I knew all there was to know about gender. And as it turns out, I had so much to learn. Luckily, for me, I had friends who were willing to share their experiences with me. I had people who freed me from my own ignorance by sharing their stories of their gender journey and how writing my own gender pronouns on my name tag liberated us all from making incorrect assumptions about each other and freed us from even imagining that we should always be able to discern a person's gender identity just by looking at them. That is quite an ignorant mistake, as a matter of fact. With humility and self-awareness and 3 simple words, help me understand. I could take that step towards learning what I didn't know I didn't know. And I am still no expert on this subject, but the greater wisdom is, of course, admitting how much I still have to learn. And as Unitarian Universalists, as people without a creed or an established version of truth, shouldn't holy curiosity be one of our greatest virtues? I mean, shouldn't it? And yet, as it turns out, we fall prey to the same thing that all other people in other denominations fall prey to, our own pride. Our own pride, sadly, gets in our own way. And so, what can you do to gain a more realistic assessment of your own abilities in a particular area if you are not sure you can trust your own self-assessment? What can you do? Well, 1, you can keep learning and practicing. Instead of assuming you already know all there is to know about a subject, keep digging deeper. Once you gain greater knowledge of a topic, the more likely you are to recognize how much there is still to learn. This can combat the tendency to assume you're an expert even when you're not. And second, this is difficult. Ask other people how you're doing. Can you see yourself doing that? Ask other people how you're doing. Ask others for their constructive criticism. And while it can sometimes be difficult to hear, this feedback can provide valuable insight into how others perceive your abilities. And finally, question what you know. Even as you learn and get feedback, it can be easy to only pay attention to the things that conform to what you already think you know. This is an example of another type of psychological bias known as confirmation bias. In order to minimize this tendency, keep challenging your beliefs and your expectations. Seek out new information that challenges your ideas. Don't fear that new information. Don't fear that challenge. Seek it out even. It takes a strong ego to question what you know and to seek out people and information that challenge your long-held belief system. My grandfather, a great patriarch, never graduated from high school, and you could not tell him anything. He was outspoken with all of his ideas and all of his opinions on all subjects. He regularly made fun of my parents for the money they wasted on higher education for themselves and their children. He won every single argument, either through intimidation or cruel jokes at others' expense. The result of his lifelong commitment to his own cognitive bias was ultimately loneliness and the loss of his family. See, we moved away, and a few years later we moved farther still, and I didn't see him much at all in the last 10 years of his life. In his isolation, his ego was protected, but at what cost? And this is generational, this Dunning-Kruger effect. Even I have to check myself, and I'm sure you will help me check myself. When someone tells me something new, I often counter with, right, I know. Even that's my knee-jerk reaction, even when I have never heard this information before. Institutions and organizations can also suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect. Politicians, by the way, manipulate this, and they use it to their advantage by keeping their base, their voters, ignorant, yet prideful. They reward their lack of knowledge with divisive statements that can make their constituents feel superior. Liberal organizations, including our own Unitarian Universalism, we have been deconstructing our own long-held biases and beliefs, working to understand the ways that as an institution and as a structure, Unitarian Universalism itself has maintained some of the premises of the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. And Unitarian Universalism is working now to free itself from its own cognitive bias, its own cultural norms, to establish new norms based on new self-awareness and on people's lived experiences. And institutionally, I will tell you, as it is personally, this is a very painful process. This requires deep compassion, humility, and expressions of love and care for one another, even as we call each other to change and evolve. The ego resilience required to address our confirmation bias, well, it's a very tall order, my friends. To practice radical humility requires deep self-love with a dash of humor at oneself. And I try to aspire to that too. First, you have to offer love and care for the child inside yourself who was perhaps demeaned, who was perhaps bullied, who was told in some way you would never measure up, who was told you were too stupid to comprehend something new. You have to care for and tend to that child who was abused or scared or was made to feel unsafe or unprotected. The first step to break down those walls the child inside has constructed for his own safety or her own safety is to really care for her or him. And then it is time, possibly with a therapist, to address those adults who were not quite caring for that child. Parents, teachers, priests, school principals, neighbors who did not protect that child, who left the child in you so exposed that you had to build some walls around yourself. And once those walls were built, you could find ways to make others feel stupid or to feel inferior. Anything that threatened you could just be chalked up to being wrong. And whatever you don't understand is now someone else's problem and not your own. And that's how you came protected from that which you did not know and could not understand. See, this is deep, deep-rooted work ahead of us if we are to take this on. The Chinese philosopher Confucius once said, "To know what you know and what you do not know, that is true knowledge." And there is truth to this. The corollary to the Dunning-Kruger effect is that people who really are experts in their fields tend to be much more humble about what they actually know and are open to correction when they are wrong. I have seen this myself in some of the greatest biblical scholars of our time: deep humility. Maybe the prerequisite to being able to learn is to know how much we don't know and to learn to listen much more than speak. To tear down these walls we have constructed within ourselves that keep us from humility, keep us from being more connected, and from that holy curiosity, well, we must disrupt our own thought patterns. We must love our inner child and love ourselves enough to change our own inner narrative, the one that insists that we already know someone else's experience, and instead allow us the gentle grace to be able to say, "I didn't know that. Help me understand." Now you may be thinking, what is she talking about? I mean, some people think the world is flat right now. Like, what am I going to get, Just try it. Even with people who don't believe climate change is real or whatever, just try it. Help me understand. Help me understand. See what happens if you just try those 3 simple words. What opens up? What opens up in their thinking, not just your own? Help me understand. Holy mystery. May we love ourselves enough to always keep learning and growing. May we love each other enough to hold each other accountable to higher wisdom and deeper understanding. May we protect each other from illusory superiority whenever it reveals itself. May we renew our commitment each day to practice radical humility, holy curiosity, and sacred awe for all we do not yet know. May we speak the mantra to ourselves and to each other. Help me understand. Amen. May it be so.